Chosen one, listen carefully. Something about the night you were born has been kept quiet for your entire life, and it is finally rising to the surface. Not slowly, not gently, all at once, the way buried things always come up, cracking the ground before anyone can stop it. You felt it before you had proof. That strange sensation that the story you were told about your own beginning never quite fit the reaction it caused. People got careful around the subject. Voices dropped half a note, eyes moved to the floor, and you learned, without ever being told directly, that your birth was not a simple story. It was a room nobody wanted to walk back into. Here's what you already sense, even if you've never said it out loud. Somewhere, there are people who know something about the day you arrived that you were never given. Not a lie exactly, a withholding, a silence dressed up as protection. And for years, that silence held. It held through birthdays where the questions got deflected. It held through family gatherings where a certain topic never came up twice. It held because everyone involved agreed, without ever agreeing out loud, that some truths are easier buried than carried. But buried things don't stay buried forever, not when they belong to someone like you. Because you were never meant to spend your whole life standing on top of a story you were never allowed to read. And the universe does not let a truth this size stay silent past its expiration date. It waits. It lets people believe they got away with something, and then, right when they've grown comfortable in their control of the narrative, it starts to leak. That's where you are right now, standing at the edge of something that's been buried since before you could talk, watching the ground start to shift. And chosen one, before we go one layer deeper into what they've been sitting on, hit that like button and subscribe, not as a formality, as a way of feeding this signal back into the universe so it reaches the next chosen one who needs to hear their own story is about to reopen. Now let's go back to the beginning. Not the beginning you were told, the one they never finished telling you. Chosen one, are you ready to walk through this piece by piece? Because what's coming isn't a rumor, it's a record. And once a record starts surfacing, nobody gets to close it back up. If you can feel that pull in your chest right now, that mix of nerves and recognition, drop 77 in the comments. Let that be your signal that you're staying for every layer of this. Let's begin. Number 1. The night nobody in your family tells the same way twice. Ask enough people about the night you were born, and you'll notice something strange. The story changes depending on who's telling it. One version is calm, ordinary, forgettable. Another version has a pause in it, a beat where the storyteller's eyes drift somewhere else before they catch themselves and finish the sentence too fast. You've felt that shift before, haven't you? The tiny stumble in an otherwise smooth memory. People don't stumble over ordinary nights. People stumble over nights they've spent years learning how to describe without describing. Here's the truth about memory. Ordinary events get told the same way every single time, because there's nothing underneath them to protect. But the night you were born isn't ordinary in the mouths of the people who were there. It has edits. It has soft spots where details used to live and don't anymore. Someone remembers a phone call that no one else remembers making. Someone remembers a delay that no one can quite explain. Someone remembers a room that briefly emptied out for reasons nobody has ever clarified. Imagine this, a photograph with one corner slightly burned, just enough that whoever's showing it to you keeps their thumb over that edge without realizing they're doing it. That's what your birth story looks like when the people who hold it retell it. A photograph with a thumb permanently covering one corner. You were never supposed to notice the thumb. You were supposed to accept the photo as whole. But you didn't, because something in you has always known there was more image beneath the cover. That knowing isn't paranoia. It's pattern recognition, the same instinct that let you sense a lie forming 3 sentences before it landed. The same instinct that made you quiet in rooms where something didn't add up. You were built to notice what gets smoothed over. And this, chosen one, is the biggest smoothing job of your life. Because it's not about a moment you can remember. It's about the moment that made you possible. And somehow, you're the only person in the story who's never been given the full account of it. That's what makes this different from every other secret they've ever kept. This isn't gossip about something you did. This is the origin story of the person doing the noticing. And origin stories, once they start cracking, don't stop at the first crack. They keep splitting until the whole shape of what you were told becomes visible for what it always was. A shell built around something they weren't ready for you to carry yet. But readiness was never really their decision to make forever. It was only ever theirs to make for a while. Think about how strange that really is. Somewhere out there, more than one person can tell you exactly what they had for lunch on an ordinary Tuesday 15 years ago. But ask about the single most important night of your existence, and the story starts wobbling within the first 3 sentences. That imbalance alone should tell you something. Ordinary nights don't need protecting. Only the ones with something underneath them do. And a version of events that's been quietly protected for this long was never protected because it was boring. It was protected because it wasn't. There's a particular kind of silence that settles over a family when a story has been agreed upon without ever being formally discussed. And you've been living inside that particular silence for as long as you can remember. Not the silence of nothing happening. The silence of something being carefully arranged around, the way people quietly step over a crack in the floor for years instead of ever fixing it, until stepping over it becomes so automatic nobody even remembers there's a crack there at all. Except you always remembered, because you were the one standing closest to it. Number 2, the look on their faces before anyone taught them what to feel. There's a photograph somewhere, or there should be, of the first moments after you arrived. And if you've ever actually seen it, or heard it described by someone who was in the room, you may have noticed something that never quite sat right. It wasn't only joy on their faces. Joy was there, yes, because joy usually is. But underneath it, if you look closely enough, there's something else. A kind of unrehearsed astonishment. The look people get when the moment in front of them doesn't match anything they prepared for. Most people expect a birth to be exactly what it's supposed to be. A small stranger who cries, gets weighed, gets named, and slowly turns into the person everyone already assumed they'd become. But some births carry a different texture from the very first second. Something about the room feels heavier than it should. Something about the silence right before you cried lasts a beat too long. And the adults in that room, the ones who are supposed to have the steadiest reactions of anyone present, sometimes look less like people meeting a baby and more like people meeting a question they don't yet know how to answer. Imagine standing at the edge of an ordinary lake your whole life, and one day the water goes still in a way that isn't natural, right before something surfaces that shouldn't be there. That stillness before the surfacing. That's the expression that lived on certain faces the night you arrived. Not fear exactly, recognition of something they weren't ready to name yet. You've probably felt echoes of that look your whole life without knowing where it came from. The way certain relatives study you a half-second longer than they study anyone else in the room. The way a stranger's eyes catch on you in public and hold there before they remember to look away. People have always looked at you like they're trying to place something, like your face is a sentence they almost finished reading once and have been trying to recall ever since. That's not your imagination. That's residue. The look on their faces the night you were born didn't disappear. It became a pattern that repeats itself every time someone who was in that room, or close enough to have heard about it, encounters you again. They're not seeing you as ordinary because you were never introduced to them as ordinary. You were introduced as something that made a room go quiet first and loud second. And the thing about a room that goes quiet first is that everyone remembers exactly why, even when they've spent years pretending they don't. Ask yourself something honestly. How many rooms have you walked into over the years where the temperature seemed to change for a second before it settled back down? How many conversations have paused, just briefly, right as you crossed a doorway? People who study body language for a living will tell you that faces rarely lie in the first half second, only in every second after that. And whatever crossed those faces in that very first half second of your life is still, in small ways, crossing them today. Imagine a photograph album where every other picture has a perfectly normal caption, except the ones near the very front, the ones from those first few days, which somehow never got captions at all. Not because nobody thought to write them, because nobody quite knew how to summarize what they were actually looking at in a single tidy sentence. Some moments resist captions precisely because the truth underneath them refuses to shrink down that small. Number 3. Someone knew you were coming before you arrived. Here's a detail that gets left out of most versions of your story. Before you were born, someone already had a feeling about you, not the ordinary anticipation every family has before an arrival. Something sharper, a pull, a restlessness that showed up in a person who wasn't usually restless, weeks before anyone had a reason to expect anything unusual. Maybe it was a grandparent who suddenly wanted to talk about the past more than usual. Maybe it was a distant relative who called out of nowhere, for no clear reason, and stayed on the phone longer than the conversation required. Maybe it was someone who mentioned a dream they had, laughed it off, and never brought it up again. But everyone in the room that day remembers exactly what they said, because it turned out to be strangely, uncomfortably close to true. People who spend their lives around beginnings, midwives, elders, the ones who've sat with enough births to notice a pattern, will tell you privately that some arrivals announce themselves before they happen, not with words, with a shift in the air that the people closest to the situation pick up on without understanding why. Someone in your story felt that shift, and instead of talking about it openly, they folded it into themselves and never brought it back up, because talking about a feeling that specific, that early, makes people uncomfortable. It makes the ordinary feel less ordinary. And most people would rather keep things ordinary than sit with the alternative. Imagine a sky that goes unusually still right before a storm nobody predicted. Farmers notice it, animals notice it, people who spend their lives paying attention to patterns notice it, even when the weather report says nothing is coming. That stillness before impact, that's what moved through your family in the weeks before you arrived. And the person who felt it clearest has likely never told you. Because how do you explain a feeling that's specific about someone who hadn't been born yet? This is part of what they've been sitting on, not just details about the night itself, but the sense that something was already different before that night even started. That you didn't simply arrive the way arrivals normally arrive. You were anticipated, in a quiet and slightly uneasy way, by someone who has spent your entire life saying nothing about it and everything about it at the same time, in the way they've always looked at you, just a little differently than they look at everyone else. "I just had a feeling," someone in your family may have said once, years ago, about something unrelated, before catching themselves and changing the subject. That phrase, said carelessly about anything else, always seems to circle back to you eventually if you listen closely enough over the years. Feelings that specific don't usually come from nowhere. They come from somewhere the person having them isn't ready to name out loud. Consider how rare it actually is for someone to remember a feeling from before a person even existed to that family yet. Most people can't recall what mood they were in a random Wednesday 2 months ago, let alone a specific restlessness weeks before an arrival nobody could have predicted the timing of. Feelings like that only get remembered clearly when something afterward proves them right. And something, eventually, did. Number 4. The name that almost wasn't yours. Every name carries a decision behind it, and most decisions like that are boring. 2 options, a preference, a compromise, done. But yours has a story attached to it that's never been told the same way twice, which is your first clue that it isn't as simple as everyone pretends. Somewhere in the lead-up to your birth, there was another name on the table. Maybe you've heard a fragment of it in passing, a name mentioned once and never again, dropped so casually that you almost missed it, except you didn't, because part of you filed it away without deciding to. And at some point, close to the day you arrived, that name got replaced. Quietly, without much explanation, as if the decision made itself and nobody wanted to admit out loud what changed their mind. Names given under ordinary circumstances get explained proudly. People love to tell you why they picked a name, who it honors, what it means, how long they debated it. But ask about yours and watch what happens. The explanation gets shorter than it should be. The story skips a step. Somewhere between the almost name and the actual one, there's a gap nobody fills in, and the people who could fill it in have quietly agreed, without a meeting, without a conversation, to just let that gap stay empty. Imagine finding a locked drawer in a desk you've used your whole life. A drawer you never questioned because it was always simply closed. That's your name's real story. Sitting one drawer over from the version you've always been told, closed. Familiar enough that you never thought to ask why it doesn't open the same way as the rest. Names given in the middle of something unresolved carry weight differently than names given in ordinary calm. And yours was decided in a window that wasn't calm at all, even if everyone around you has spent years acting like it was. That's not a small detail. That's a signal. Somewhere in the space between the name that almost was and the name you carry now, there's a version of the story about your arrival that nobody has handed you yet. And chosen one, drawers like that don't stay locked forever, not once the room around them starts to shake loose everything else it's been holding on to. Ask why a decision that should have taken an evening apparently took until the very last possible moment. Ask why the name that almost was still occasionally surfaces, half by accident, from someone older who forgets, just for a second, that it isn't supposed to be spoken anymore. A name that gets erased, that carefully was never simply a preference. It was a choice made to close a door quietly, in the same week that door needed closing, for reasons nobody has explained to you since. Imagine a signature crossed out on an old form, one line drawn cleanly through it, replaced by a second signature written in a slightly different hand. Somewhere, in some drawer, on some piece of paper nobody has looked at in years, that exact kind of correction may still exist for your name too. A small crossing out that was never meant to be found, sitting patiently in ink that doesn't fade the way memories do. Before we go further, if this is landing somewhere real in you right now, drop that super thanks if you're able. It keeps messages like this reaching the people who are meant to hear their own story, cracking open right along with yours. Now let's keep pulling this thread. Number 5. The sky remembers what they won't say out loud. There's a detail about the day you were born that has nothing to do with any person's memory, which is exactly why it's harder to erase. The weather, the timing, the strange coincidences layered around the hour you arrived, those things don't rely on anyone's willingness to talk. They exist in records, in old photographs, in the kind of small factual detail that outlives every version of a story people try to control. Maybe it was a storm that rolled in at an unusual hour and passed just as fast as it came. Maybe it was a date that lines up with something significant nobody in your family ever explains. Maybe it was simply timing so precise, so specific, that even the people who don't believe in signs still bring it up occasionally, almost against their will, and then change the subject fast. You've probably heard a fragment of this before. a passing comment about the weather that day, a joke about timing that never quite lands as a joke. People mention these details the way you mention something you've decided not to think too hard about, quickly, lightly, and then somewhere else immediately after. Imagine standing outside during an eclipse. You don't need anyone to confirm what you're seeing, because the sky itself is doing the confirming. That's what the conditions around your birth have quietly done for years. They've confirmed, without a single person needing to say it out loud, that the day you arrived wasn't like other days. And the people who were there know it, even the ones who'd rather you never connect those dots yourself. This is part of what's rising now. Not because someone finally decided to be honest, but because details like this don't need permission to resurface. They exist independent of anyone's comfort. And once you start noticing how many small, strange, unexplained things cluster around the hour of your arrival, you start to understand why the people closest to that day have spent so long being careful about how they talk about it. It was never an ordinary night. And the sky has been saying so this entire time, quietly, patiently, waiting for you to be the one who finally starts asking. Records don't get nervous. Records don't stumble over their own sentences the way people do. And that's exactly why the parts of your story written into weather logs, hospital timestamps, and old newspapers matter more than anyone managing the narrative would like. Paper and sky have no incentive to protect anyone's comfort. They simply hold what happened, unbothered, waiting for someone to finally go looking. Funny how I still remember exactly what the sky looked like that night, someone may have said once, half laughing, before quickly moving on to something else. People don't remember weather from ordinary nights decades later without effort. They remember weather from nights that meant something, the same way a soldier remembers the exact color of the sky on the day everything changed, even when they'd rather not. Number 6. The hallway conversations that stopped the moment you walked in. Every family has a hallway like this, a space just outside the room where the real conversations happen, low-voiced, urgent, cut off the instant a door opens or a chair creaks. And in your family, that hallway has always belonged to one subject more than any other: you. You've felt this your whole life without being able to name it precisely. Walking into a kitchen where the conversation stops half a beat too fast. Catching the tail end of a sentence that gets swallowed before you're close enough to hear the rest. Noticing how certain relatives glance at each other first, before they answer a simple question you've asked, like they're checking permission from someone who isn't even in the room. That's not accidental. That's rehearsal. Somewhere along the way, without ever holding an official meeting about it, the people closest to your birth agreed on a version of events they'd present to you, and they've spent years quietly reinforcing that agreement every time your name or your birth comes up in conversation. The hallway is where the unfiltered version lives. The room is where the polished version gets performed. Imagine a play where every actor has memorized their lines perfectly, except one detail keeps slipping: a prop out of place, a pause that lands a second too long. That's what it feels like standing near people who are performing a story around you instead of simply telling it. You've picked up on the seams, even when you couldn't identify exactly where they were. This is part of the secret, working its way loose. Every hallway conversation that's ever stopped the moment you entered a room has been building toward this exact point. The point where the difference between what gets said to your face and what gets said behind your back becomes too large to keep managing quietly. Chosen one. Hallways don't stay separate from rooms forever. Eventually, the walls between them wear thin enough that every word said on one side starts bleeding into the other, whether anyone intended it to or not. We'll tell them when they're older. How many families have said that sentence about something, at some point, about someone? And how many of those someones grew up, got older, and never actually received the telling, because older kept quietly getting redefined every single year. That sentence isn't a promise, it's a placeholder. And placeholders like that only last as long as nobody calls them out loud for what they really are. Imagine a hallway lined with doors, each one slightly ajar except for one, which has stayed closed for so long that nobody in the house even registers it as a door anymore. It's simply part of the wall now, unremarkable, unquestioned. Except walls don't have hinges, and every so often, if you stand close enough, you can still hear something faint moving on the other side of it. Number 7. The stranger who came, said something, and disappeared. Somewhere in the earliest days of your life, there's a person who doesn't quite fit the rest of the story. Not a relative exactly, not a stranger exactly either. Someone who showed up, said something that landed heavier than the moment called for, and then was never really seen or mentioned again in the same way. Maybe it was someone who visited briefly and looked at you a beat too long before saying something cryptic that made the adults in the room go still. Maybe it was an old friend of the family who suddenly reappeared right around your birth and vanished shortly after, never fully explained, never fully accounted for. Maybe it was someone whose name comes up rarely, and always with the same careful, clipped tone that signals a story nobody wants to unpack right now. People who carry weight in a family don't usually disappear from the narrative without a reason. And when someone does disappear that cleanly, that completely, it's rarely because nothing happened. It's because something happened that was easier to file away than to explain. Imagine a guest at a gathering who says one strange prophetic sentence before leaving early, and for years afterward, everyone remembers the sentence, but nobody brings up the person who said it. That's the shape of this figure in your story. A presence reduced to a single unexplained line, orbiting the edge of your birth, like a comet nobody tracked closely enough to predict when it would return. This detail matters more than it seems, because whoever that person was, they saw something in that room that the rest of your family has spent years trying not to revisit. And people who see something like that don't simply forget it, they carry it quietly, the same way everyone else in your story has, until the moment arrives when carrying it quietly stops being possible. That moment, chosen one, is closer than anyone involved would like to admit. Where did that person go? Why does no one seem to know, or want to know, or want you to ask? People who matter enough to be remembered clearly usually stay reachable, even loosely, even at a distance. A person who vanishes that completely from an otherwise ordinary family circle wasn't ordinary to that circle. They were a loose thread, and someone, at some point, made a quiet decision to stop pulling on it. Whatever happened to them is a question that gets asked about a lot of people over the years, in a lot of families, usually followed by an easy answer. Moved away, lost touch, nothing dramatic. But notice how differently that question lands when it's about this particular person. Notice the pause before the shrug. Notice how the shrug arrives a half-second too late to be entirely convincing. Number 8. The documents that keep moving from drawer to drawer. Every family has paperwork nobody thinks about until they need it. Certificates, records, small official pieces of a person's beginning that usually sit untouched for decades. Yours hasn't sat untouched. Yours has moved. Maybe you've noticed it without registering the pattern. A folder that used to live in one place and quietly relocated to another. A document someone mentioned once and then acted strange about when you asked to see it again. A drawer that gets reorganized a little too carefully whenever the subject of your birth records comes up in conversation. People don't reorganize paperwork that means nothing to them. They reorganize paperwork they're managing. Paperwork that carries a detail they'd rather control the access to than explain outright. And in your case, that paperwork has apparently required more managing than anyone's willing to admit. Imagine a locked box kept on a high shelf, moved slightly, every time someone new visits the house, just enough that its exact location stays a little uncertain even to the people who live there. That's the pattern surrounding the records tied to your birth. Not destroyed, not hidden in some dramatic, cinematic way. Just quietly, persistently, kept slightly out of reach. This is part of what's finally coming loose. Documents like this don't stay perfectly managed forever. Not across years, not across the number of people who've had to touch them, store them, half explain them to someone who asked the wrong question at the wrong time. Somewhere in that long chain of quiet handling, a gap is forming, a moment where the paperwork says more than the people around it ever meant for it to say. And chosen one, once paper starts speaking louder than the people holding it, there's no putting that voice back in the folder. Every custodian eventually gets tired. Every careful hand eventually slips. And paperwork managed by more than one generation only needs one small oversight. One file left open a moment too long. One question answered too honestly by someone who forgot they weren't supposed to answer it at all, for the whole careful arrangement to finally show its seams in the daylight. Imagine a museum exhibit behind glass that gets quietly rearranged every few years, the placards updated just slightly, the lighting adjusted so certain angles stay in shadow. Visitors walk past it 1,000 times without noticing anything unusual, because that's the point of careful curation. But curators eventually retire. New staff eventually ask why the arrangement is the way it is, and nobody stays behind the glass forever to keep explaining the same careful answer. Number 9. Why your birthday makes certain rooms go quiet. You've felt this one for years, even if you've never said it out loud. The way certain people get slightly careful around your birthday. Not cold, not distant, just careful, in a way that doesn't match how they treat any other calendar date. A conversation that steers gently away from certain years. A toast that stays vague on purpose. A relative who suddenly remembers somewhere else they need to be right when the subject shifts toward that specific day. Ordinary birthdays don't require careful navigation. People talk about them freely, tell the same stories every year, laugh at the same small details. Yours has edges. Yours has a handful of years that seem to get skipped over entirely, mentioned only in the vaguest terms, if they're mentioned at all. Imagine a calendar with one date circled in pencil, so light it's barely visible. A date everyone in the house quietly avoids without ever officially deciding to. That's what your birthday has become inside certain rooms. Present, unavoidable, and handled with a kind of unspoken caution that no ordinary date requires. This caution isn't random, and it isn't really about you as a person. It's about what that date represents to the people who were there. Every year it arrives, it drags a little bit of that original night back into the room with it. And every year, the people closest to it manage that resurfacing the same quiet way they've managed everything else about your birth. Smiling through it, steering around it. Hoping this is the year, nobody asks the question that's been sitting unanswered since the beginning. But chosen one, a date can only be managed so many times before the managing itself becomes the story. And that's exactly where things are headed now. Notice how the toasts get shorter every year, not longer, even as there's supposedly more life to celebrate. Notice how certain photos from certain birthdays never quite make it into the albums everyone else flips through so freely. A date this significant deserves more warmth than it's been given, and the gap between the warmth it deserves and the caution it actually receives has been quietly measuring something for your entire life. Let's not make a big deal out of it this year. That sentence has probably been said about your birthday more than once, usually by someone who insists on making a big deal out of everyone else's. Small requests like that rarely come from nowhere. They come from someone quietly managing how much light gets pointed at a date they'd rather stay dim. Number 10. The elder who wouldn't hold you right away. In almost every family, There's a moment right after a birth where everyone takes their turn. The baby gets passed carefully from arm to arm, admired, welcomed, folded into the family in that first physical way. In your story, there's a hesitation in that sequence that doesn't quite match the rest. Someone, an elder, someone whose opinion carried weight in that room, didn't step forward right away. Not out of coldness. Out of something closer to caution, the kind of pause a person takes when they're processing something faster than their body knows how to respond to. It might have only lasted a few seconds. It might have been explained away instantly as tiredness or emotion. But the people who were in that room remember it, even if they've never said so directly. Elders in most families carry a kind of instinct the rest of the household defers to without questioning it. When that instinct hesitates, everyone else notices, even if nobody comments on it in the moment. And in your case, that hesitation has quietly shaped how certain relatives have treated you ever since, without ever fully explaining why. Imagine a room full of people reaching toward something new, and one person, the one everyone trusts to know things instinctively, holds back just long enough for everyone else to notice the gap. That gap became part of your story before you were even a day old, and it's been quietly present in the background of your relationship with that elder and with the people who took their cues from that elder every year since. This is one of the harder truths sitting underneath everything else, chosen one. Not because it means anything was wrong with you, because it means someone in that room recognized something about you immediately, something significant enough to make even an experienced elder pause. And recognition like that doesn't disappear. It just gets quietly folded into decades of careful behavior nobody has ever fully explained. You may have spent years quietly wondering why that particular relationship always felt one careful step removed from every other one in your life, warm enough on the surface, but never quite fully unguarded. Now you have a starting point for that answer. Not a full explanation yet, just a starting point. And starting points, once you've found them, tend to lead somewhere. Imagine an experienced captain who has sailed through 1,000 ordinary storms without flinching once, and then one particular morning, for reasons the crew never fully understood, hesitates before giving the order to move forward. The crew remembers that hesitation for years, even after the ship sails on safely, because instinct at steady doesn't pause without a reason worth remembering. Number 11. Why they've always watched you differently than everyone else. You've noticed it your whole life, even when you couldn't articulate it cleanly. The way certain people track you across a room without meaning to. The way conversations about you carry a slightly different weight than conversations about anyone else in the family. The way you've been corrected more carefully, praised more cautiously, discussed more quietly than your siblings, your cousins, the people who share your exact same upbringing. That difference in treatment isn't random, and it isn't your imagination working overtime. People treat things according to how significant they believe those things to be. And somewhere early on, before you could even understand what was happening, the people around you decided, consciously or not, that you required a different kind of attention. Not more love necessarily, more vigilance. Imagine a household with one particular object handled just slightly more carefully than everything else in the room, wrapped a little more securely, placed a little further from the edge of the shelf, without anyone ever explaining out loud why that one item gets treated differently. That's the quiet, careful handling that's followed you since your earliest days, present in 100 small choices nobody has ever sat you down and explained. This careful handling traces directly back to whatever happened, or whatever was understood, the night you were born. Something about that night convinced the people closest to you that you weren't an entirely ordinary addition to the family, and that conviction has shaped their behavior around you in ways so consistent, so long-standing, that it simply became your normal. You grew up inside a pattern of careful attention without ever being told what that attention was protecting or protecting itself from. And chosen one, patterns like that only exist for a reason significant enough to justify decades of maintenance. Think about how much quiet effort a pattern like that actually takes to keep up for this many years. Nobody accidentally maintains careful behavior for 2 decades straight. Vigilance that consistent is a decision, renewed quietly, over and over, by people who understood something early on that they never got around to explaining to the one person it was actually about. Imagine a garden where one particular plant gets checked on every single morning, watered a little more carefully, positioned a little further from the frost line, while the rest of the garden grows however it grows. A gardener who tends to one plant that differently isn't playing favorites. They're protecting something they know is more fragile, or more valuable, or both, than anything growing next to it. Number 12. The truth that's already leaking out around the edges. Here's what makes this moment different from every other time this subject has almost surfaced before. It's not staying contained anymore. Small pieces are already slipping loose, in comments made half-jokingly at gatherings, in old photographs that get shared without anyone thinking through what they reveal, in a distant relative who's grown older and less careful about guarding a story that was never really theirs to guard in the first place. You may have already felt this shift without naming it. A comment that landed slightly too specific to be a coincidence. A photograph you weren't meant to see, showing a detail that doesn't match the version of the story you've always been told. A relative who, maybe out of age, maybe out of guilt, maybe simply out of exhaustion from holding something this long, has started saying just a little more than they used to. Imagine water finding the smallest crack in a dam, not enough to break it outright, but enough that everyone standing nearby can hear the pressure building behind it. That's exactly where this stands right now. The full truth about your birth hasn't broken through yet, but the pressure behind it has become impossible for the people managing it to fully contain, and cracks like that only widen from here. This is precisely why certain people around you have seemed unusually on edge lately, without an obvious explanation. They can feel the same pressure you can. They know the managed version of your story is losing its grip, piece by piece, and there's nothing they can do to stop water that's already found its way through. Chosen one, the leaking has already started. What's coming next isn't a possibility. It's a certainty that's simply waiting for its final moment to arrive. Old age has a way of loosening things that decades of careful discipline once held tight. People who spent 40 years being careful sometimes spend one unguarded afternoon undoing all of it in a single sentence, not out of malice, but out of simple human tiredness. And once a sentence like that is spoken out loud, it can never fully be unspoken again, no matter how quickly the room tries to move past it. You weren't supposed to hear that. 4 words that mean more than almost anything else that could be said in a family, because they confirm, instantly and completely, that there was always something specific, not meant for your ears. Not a vague feeling anymore. A direct admission, even if it gets walked back 30 seconds later with a nervous laugh. Number 13. Why it's surfacing now and not years ago. You might wonder why, after all this time, after years of careful management, hallway conversations, moved documents, and quiet hesitations, the truth about your birth is finally rising now. The answer isn't random, and it isn't about anyone suddenly deciding to be honest out of the goodness of their heart. It's about timing. The same precise, patient timing that governs every truth too large to stay buried forever. Secrets like this don't surface when it's convenient for the people holding them. They surface when the person at the center of the story has finally grown strong enough to hold the weight of it. For most of your life, you weren't in a position to carry this. You were still forming, still healing, still becoming the version of yourself capable of hearing a truth this large without it breaking you apart. The people managing the secret knew that, even if they never said it directly. And so they waited, and the universe waited alongside them, until the exact moment your capacity finally caught up to the size of what's been hidden. Imagine a seed buried far deeper than most, requiring years longer than ordinary seeds to reach the surface, not because something is wrong with it, but because whatever it's carrying needed that extra time to fully form underground before it could survive the exposure of daylight. That's what's happening now, not a delayed discovery, a perfectly timed one. This is why the pressure has built exactly now, why the details have started leaking exactly now, why the people who've spent your whole life being careful have suddenly started slipping. It's not coincidence catching up to them. It's you, finally standing steady enough that the truth no longer has a reason to stay hidden behind you. Chosen one, you were never too fragile for this story. You were simply still becoming strong enough to survive hearing it, and that becoming is now complete. Think back on the version of yourself from even 5 years ago. Would that version have been ready for a truth this size? Probably not. And somewhere, someone close to you probably sensed that too, which is exactly why the timing has never been about punishment or secrecy for its own sake. It's always been about waiting for the one moment when revealing it would build you instead of breaking you. Imagine a bridge built to hold a weight far beyond what it's ever been asked to carry, sitting quietly unused for years, tested occasionally, reinforced occasionally, until finally the day comes when the exact load it was built for actually needs to cross it. The bridge doesn't buckle because it was never actually unfinished. It was simply waiting for the moment its full purpose would finally arrive. Number 14. What the ones who know are quietly bracing for. Watch closely, and you'll notice something new that wasn't there a year ago, or even a few months ago. The people who've carried this the longest have started behaving differently, not guiltier exactly, but more aware, the way people get right before something they've been managing finally slips out of their hands entirely. Maybe it's a relative who's suddenly overly kind to you in ways that feel slightly rehearsed. Maybe it's someone who brings up old memories unprompted, testing the water, watching your reaction closely before deciding how much further to go. Maybe it's simply a change in tone, a softness that wasn't there before, the kind of softness people offer right before they're about to ask for forgiveness they haven't earned the right to ask for yet. Imagine a group of people who've spent years quietly rehearsing an explanation they hoped they'd never actually have to give, running through it in their heads late at night, adjusting the wording, softening the edges, preparing for a conversation that keeps getting closer, whether they're ready or not. That's the quiet bracing happening around you right now, chosen one, even if nobody's said a single direct word about it yet. They know what's coming. They've known longer than you have. And the strange kindness, the sudden closeness, the careful softness you may have noticed lately isn't random affection, it's preparation. People don't prepare for nothing. They prepare for moments they can feel approaching, and this one has been approaching for your entire life. Imagine actors backstage in the final minutes before a curtain rises on a scene they've rehearsed nervously for weeks, checking their costumes one more time, running their lines under their breath one more time, glancing at each other with the particular kind of tension that only exists right before something irreversible begins. That tension is what's moving quietly through certain rooms around you right now, even in conversations that have nothing to do with you on the surface. The people who know can feel the curtain rising, whether they're ready for their entrance or not. Number 15. What changes the moment it finally comes out? Here's the part that matters most, chosen one. Once this truth fully surfaces, and it will, nothing about who you are underneath it changes. What changes is your understanding of why you've always felt slightly different from the story you were handed. Why certain rooms went quiet, Why certain people watched you a little closer. Why your birthday carried weight nobody explained. Why your name has a locked drawer sitting right next to it. Why the sky itself seemed to mark the hour you arrived. You won't need to confront anyone dramatically. You won't need to demand an explanation in front of a room full of people. The truth doesn't require your intervention to finish arriving. It only required your strength to survive its arrival. And that strength has been building in you this entire time, quietly, the same way the secret itself built quietly on the other side of every careful conversation. Imagine standing in a room as the lights slowly come up after years of dim, careful lighting. Not blinding, not sudden, just enough that every shape you've been squinting to understand your whole life finally becomes clear all at once. That's what's coming. Not chaos, clarity. The kind that rearranges your entire sense of your own beginning without asking you to rebuild anything else about who you've already become. The people who've carried this secret will finally set it down, whether they're ready to or not. Because secrets this heavy eventually choose their own moment to be released, regardless of who's holding them. And you, chosen one, will finally understand what you've sensed your whole life without ever having the language for it. That your beginning was never as simple as you were told. That something about the night you arrived mattered enough to protect, to manage, to carry quietly for years by people who loved you and feared the truth in equal measure. This is your story finishing the sentence it started the moment you were born, not because you forced it open, but because it was always going to open eventually, on its own timing, in its own way, exactly when you were finally ready to hold what it's been carrying all along. Imagine reaching the final page of a book you didn't realize you'd been reading your entire life, only to discover the missing chapter was never actually torn out. It was simply bound at the back, waiting patiently for the reader to reach the point where they were finally ready to understand it in context, rather than being confused or frightened by it too early. You are arriving at that final page now, chosen one, not as someone being ambushed by a stranger's story, but as the one person in the entire book who was always meant to read it all the way through. Chosen one, this is where we close today's chapter. Not loudly, not with confrontation, just with the quiet certainty that the truth about your birth has been rising for a long time, and it is almost fully surfaced now. If this reached the part of you that's always sensed there was more to your own story, drop 77 one more time in the comments, and let that be your marker that you're ready for what comes next. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with someone else who's always felt like their own beginning was never fully explained to them. Thank you for being here, chosen one. We'll see you in the next one. Take care and goodbye.